What if solving today's most pressing challenges, like workforce readiness and equitable access to opportunity, relied not on one sector, but on the power of community collaboration? Welcome to Think Difference, the podcast where educators, innovators, nonprofits, and industry leaders come together to shape the future. Here, we explore how collective action can transform not just classrooms or boardrooms, but entire communities. Stick around for stories, strategies, and conversations that spark real-world change as we make the weirdest connections to transact a win-win. Because at MindSpark, we don't just think different, we think difference.
We're your hosts, Keisha Miller
And Lauren Schaefer.
and in this episode on transforming experiences in education, we're sitting down with Tom Driscoll, CEO of EdTech Teacher. Join us as we talk about the value of education, the importance of the teaching profession, and bringing industry partners into the school systems.
Tom Driscoll is an author, keynote speaker, and CEO of EdTech Teacher. His career in education began teaching high school social studies in 2 public school districts in Connecticut. Following his graduate research at Teachers College of Columbia University, Tom began writing and speaking nationally about his practical experiences teaching and iterating blended learning models. Before joining EdTech Teacher, Tom served as digital learning director for the Bristol Warren Regional School District in Rhode Island, leading their Future Ready educational technology initiative and one-to-one device program. Tom has authored chapters for several instructional technology books and media outlets, for example, Edutopia, EdSurge, New York Times. And his most recent book, Becoming Active Citizens, was published by Solution Tree Press in 2022. Well, Tom, good morning. We're so happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining our podcast.
And
Oh,
what
thanks
a
so much
resume
for having me.
you.
Yes, I know. Like, those are so many fun things that you've accomplished so far.
No, yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So we'll jump in kind of like just going background in education. Can you tell us about an educator who was incredibly impactful on your career?
Well, like many educators, I'm from an educator family, right? So, probably my first one is got to be my dad. I mean, my dad was a elementary science teacher, and what I love about him is he was such a classic like experiential science type guy. So like he'd
Awesome.
always be the guy that would like sneak out with his class to go down to the river behind the school type thing. And they're like, "Where'd Mr. Driscoll go again?" And I mean, in his credit, he'd also be the guy that, like, when the big push toward accountability and testing would come out, he'd like basically use the stack of tests as a doorstop and be like, "All right, kids, let's get outside." So he was definitely that type of teacher. And I'm not, it is, what it is, but I think he really, from an early age, kind of got me to think about, regardless of what type of class it is or what approach you have or what technology you have. Um, you got to get kids to care and in some cases enjoy what they're doing. Right? It's simple, like, and that hasn't changed in the last 50 years. So he was one of my first real inspirations for teaching and just getting kids to engage in a different way. That's fun.
I love massive.
So close to home too. Like what a
Yeah.
great like example to kind of get to see every single day. So
Mhm.
that's great. What do you wish would have been different in your K-12 educational experience when you were a student?
And I also want to add to tack on to that question, just because you come from a family of educators, you watched your dad be an educator. Um, can you expand in your answer to that question for your K through 12 experience and maybe some of those differences you saw in the way that we treated teachers or sort of the freedom teachers had in their classrooms during your dad's era of being an educator and
Yeah.
your own?
Yeah, I experienced it shift a lot. Even as a student. So I did my schooling in 80s and 90s, and then I entered the profession in the early 2000s, and that was the big shift historically towards standardization, accountability measures, all of that, and there was a lot of good that came out of it, but there was also some collateral damage that happened in those
Yep.
decades, and I think we're still kind of experiencing that.
Yeah.
And I think part of it has been that even though we've have tightened things up as far as curriculum and scope and sequence and standards, which has been overall a good thing. It's certainly taken some of the creativity out of the profession in some cases, and
Yeah.
in some cases, it's actually taken away some teacher autonomy.
Yeah.
And I know that that's always and I've been on both sides of this. I've been a teacher in the classroom. I've been an administrator in the district. And when I was an administrator in the district, that everything was kind of hands off, I was going crazy too because I'm like, well, everyone's just doing their own thing, so I can get
Mhm.
it on both sides of it. But I do think that the teachers that impacted me the most that I enjoyed were the ones that would do things that were beyond just the typical scope and sequence. Like no one ever remembers back to their schooling and says, "Wow, that was an awesome do now activity on standard 10.2." Like, and I know we got to do that, but that's not going to be a memorable, authentic experience for kids. So that's
Yeah.
really where I wish there was more of that today that I saw even when I was like younger in school.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Like your point about like just losing like creativity alone, and it has caused a huge shift. And I feel like now we're working so hard to bring some of that back in classrooms. Like we see some teachers that are trying so hard to like make those experiences back to be more creative for kids and like so much more just hands on and authentic. And I feel like yeah, we like lost that for a little bit. And I feel like hopefully we'll go back on this swing pendulum this way,
Yeah.
going back toward that
I was
for
gonna
sure.
say it seems like it's been a big pendulum swing, and we're trying to find that safe
Yeah.
space in the middle
Yes.
that standardizes it enough that kids are getting equitable opportunities and equitable access to education and learning, the same things in their classrooms, regardless of what neighborhood they're in or state they're in. But at the same time, like we can't sterilize it by standardizing it too much.
Right.
Absolutely. So we have like a kind of a pivotal thing to focus on here at Mindspark. It's called flipping the script, like kind of just changing things up, throwing out something new. Can you describe a time you flipped the script in education?
Yeah, probably one of the things I had the most fun doing was I was about maybe 2 or 3 years into flipping my class, and I came across this guy who, his name was Matt Farber, and he was a expert in gamification and game-based learning, and he was, like,
Yeah.
legit, like, really knew it, like, game designer level, not just someone that uses Kahoot, like, really knew
Yeah.
gamification. So, he was fascinating, and I did some research on, there's a book called The Multiplayer Classroom that I read, and it was actually about a college professor, and he helped a Mandarin professor turn their course into an escape from, an airport or
Oh,
something.
cool.
That's fun.
You had to learn enough Mandarin to go through the simulations to get out of
Yeah.
the airport.
And that's kind of real life sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it was cool, so, like, it was a gamification, but it wasn't just, like, how many XP points you can get, it was an actual, like, role play simulation game.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really fun. So a couple years I tried that where we did kind of like a gamified world history course where each unit was like a mission and they had to do these quests in each mission, and it was a lot of fun. And I realized that it didn't work for all kids. Some because I taught high school, some
Yeah.
kids loved it and some kids were like, this is so stupid. Right. But the kids that thought it was stupid, I was like, fine, you can still all the assignments, like everything was still there. It's just it
Yeah.
wasn't packaged in this narrative. So I kind of gave them an opt out. I was like, look, if you just want to do the assignments, that's fine. But if you want to
Right.
opt into the experience, you can. But that was fun because it also showed me how even in the gaming community, people play games for different reasons.
Mhm.
When people just
Yeah.
say, "Oh, it's a game," like, well, maybe you just want to get the most XP and make a bunch of skins for your person or whatever. But then other people like they play games to socialize and to
Yeah.
cooperate, and other people just want to win, right? So even if you want to do gamification, game-based learning in the classroom, you can do it in a lot of different ways,
Yes.
What
and that
was
was
the
really cool.
feedback from your administration at that time when you did that? I'm sure you kind of rocked some chairs.
Yeah, well, actually, the bigger shift was moving towards mastery-based progressions. That was the bigger
Mm,
push. Because if you think about a video game, you don't move on till you master something.
Yeah.
right.
It's mastery learning, right? So it's
Yeah.
mastery progressively. So we actually had to first go through, all right, how, what does competency-based learning look like? How do you progress through a curriculum in that way? And then we added the game layers on top. So actually the game layers weren't as hard of a push as mastery learning. Because
Oh.
almost no school district in the world is set up well for mastery learning.
Yes.
We're
Mhm.
we're built for averages. Everyone is. It's just the nature of
Mhm.
school right now. We're not going to change it tomorrow, to be honest. But I think that was the discussion that we had to have first, and then once we get like, hey, yeah, let's do it. Then we really open things.
Well, the beauty for a gamifying thing that's like for kids, like if get out in a video game or you lose whatever, you just start again. It's like you try it
Mhm,
again, you start over. There's no
mhm.
like real repercussion there. It's like low leverage. It's just like you just try it again until you get it. So I think that what a great like model for kids and promoting it. Like you had the opportunity to try again until you need it, until you get that mastery level. So I love that was kind of innately built in their learning. And that's so like visual. Games are usually like they're flashy and they're
Yeah.
colorful and they're fun to look at and they're so
Yeah.
engaging. And so it's like that's another great way to like just tap into so many different learning styles for young students. And the opposite provided also for the ones who are like, no, I'm good. But that's awesome.
And
That
it
experience.
to a certain extent brings in this element of like career connected learning, because
Mhm.
that element of like failing the level or something, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's not, you don't,
Yes.
your grades
Right.
not tanked over this.
Yeah.
You just start again. You pick yourself up and you figure out where you went wrong and you start again. And that's really connected to the real world for
Yes.
students too.
And you build on what you learn as you go. Like, okay, I learned
Mhm.
this, now I move forward. But that's
Yeah,
so
and I
great.
guess one final little point on that I think's
Yeah.
also fascinating, just from a teaching and learning standpoint, is that when we had our like XP and like you gain points and skills, it would always go up,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And it seems kind of trivial, but it's not, because when kids learn things, like you're getting more knowledge and skills, it keeps
Hmm.
going
Yes.
up. But how many times, like, say I have an 85 average, I learned all of this new stuff and I got a 70 on a quiz. I learned all of these things, but my average went down.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you're getting smarter, although that number is going down, right? So
Hmm.
it's
Yes.
strange if you think about, like, I keep going back to this, but I think the way we grade is so stupid, right?
I agree.
Like, right?
Yeah.
But like now, this kid that just learned all of these things and maybe got a 70, his reinforcement is that, oh yeah, your grade went down. Like
Hmm.
Mm.
that's a dumb signal to send to somebody that just learned a bunch of things. So
Right.
I think there
Right.
is something to be said with that idea of just constantly accumulating and recognizing and acknowledging that you just got smarter, and
Yes.
doing that in a way that doesn't seem like it's bad, because that's how it's set up sometimes.
And I, from a learner's perspective, I've never been an educator in the classroom, but
Mhm.
from a student perspective, I remember always like trying to figure out, how do I get that 100? How do I get that 90? And
Mhm.
Right.
the papers or the tests or the presentations or something where I maybe got a poor grade, it took so much more effort for me to actually learn the content versus those tests and those teachers that I kind of figured out what they were looking for and how to get that correct grade from them. Improved my people skills in those
Yeah.
classes, but maybe not the amount of like knowledge and content that actually like stayed with me and moved on with me. So
That's
kind of to the point you're kind of getting at, what would you do if you had the opportunity to change the grading system for all of
Yeah.
public ed? What would you do? How would you design it?
Oh, I would move it more towards like a credentialing type system,
Hmm.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So like think about, like, if you're going into the world of work right now, like especially in the IT field, like it's about like what credentials, what skill sets, what competencies do you have?
Yeah.
And that's what we should be building in school. So it should be more of
Mhm.
like competency based and showing that you demonstrated that, right? So just more things like performance tasks, portfolios demonstrating their work. There was a school, it's called New View Design Studio. I think it's or New View High School. I think it's up in the Boston area. But I loved it because it was all around. They'd pick a problem, they would design a solution to it. They would get feedback and grading, but it was more about like those skills that you developed over time and demonstrating and
Yes.
understanding of it. And whether it's through a badge or a point, I don't really care what the point system is, but I think especially when you get to that high school level, that's really motivating for kids too. Right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
like in that class that you got all those hundreds and that you were point chasing, because you know how to play the game of school, right?
Yeah.
You know how to
You
play the
feel
game and get an A.
Yeah.
But instead, if we said, hey, in that class, you could still play the game, but you're going to get these 15 skills that you master and you're going to get credentialed for it on your transcript. That'd be
Hmm.
Mhm.
motivating for you too, but it's clear like what you learned and how you got there. So I
Yeah.
don't think it's not as monumental of a shift as people think. Like you don't have to change the curriculum necessarily. You don't have to change the standard. It's
Right.
it's just how do we give students the feedback that they are progressing towards mastery in a certain skill beyond just the GPA average.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that still doesn't make much sense.
That reminds me a lot of one of my favorite elements of the problem-based learning model that we bring into schools and teach educators.
Mhm.
One of my favorite elements of it is the panels that grade the kids' solutions to the problems that they focused on all semester or lesson
Mhm.
or, however long the teachers decide to do their PBL sessions, is that when these industry professionals come in, they're not grading on that 0 to 100 scale. They're telling Billy or Sally, your research lacked a little bit here, but your eye contact during the presentation and your ability to speak and present the idea clearly is, top notch. You're doing great in that area. But or maybe you hogged the microphone a little bit and you needed to share a little bit more space with your team players, but you clearly are very knowledgeable about the subject. And instead of it being this sort of like docking 5 points here and docking 10 points here, it's the same kind of feedback that any of us would get if
Yes.
you had a
Yeah.
huge presentation or project and then you walked into your boss's office afterwards. Your boss isn't going to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an 87 on that. They're going to say,
Right.
Right.
you should have done this differently, but this was really well and you read the crowd really well in that space. And
Yeah.
it's more aligned with what the workforce really is like.
Yeah. More
No.
qualitative feedback. Go back and forth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great point. I love that. That'd be a great system. And I feel like for right now, we know we have so many like different kinds of learners. So even like the pacing of that sort of presentation system would be so great. Like if you're, it's Sally and you're over here and this is like more your speed, that's great. But then if you're Billy and you're like, I want to move faster, I need to move slower, whatever, then people can do that like with those competency based styles instead. And then we're
Yeah.
addressing all these needs really at one time without having to shift, like you said, so much from the ground up and change all these different things, which is awesome.
Yeah. And without putting more on teachers' plates.
Yes. Yes. Just shifting
Right.
it. But well, it's kind of on that same note. So both EdTech Teacher and MindSpark really are committed to these like authentic real world experiences for kids and transforming learning. Can you share what that kind of looks like in action and why you believe these kind of transformative experiences are so important for kids and students today?
Yeah, so I gotta give a big shout out to Scott McCloud and some of his work. So if you haven't been following his work with some of his deeper learning competencies, he's done a lot of excellent studies. First of all, who is he? So he's a researcher out of Colorado. He's done amazing work in this space, and he specializes in like what is deeper learning, what does it look like in the classroom, what is
Mhm.
authenticity, and he's been um, studying high schools, and I think he just went on sabbatical to do elementary and middle schools, but highlighting what authentic real world learning looks like. And one that he showed me was called Iowa Big, and that's a very cool school. And what I thought about it was that it really, we talk about flipping the script. These students would actually get pitches from business owners of challenges.
That's
They
so
would
cool.
pitch the challenge to the kids, and then the kids that semester is like, all right, we need to design a solution to that challenge that the community just gave us. And then they would pitch their solution to the problem that was based in the community. And I think that that's such a great way to think about authenticity in the schools. That doesn't take a ton of money. It doesn't
Mhm.
take a lot of planning. It's just like, all right, leverage the community that you have. I'm sure there's experts and smart people in every community. Um, in some cases, you can find some entrepreneurs in your community and then have them surface some of the challenges with the kids that they should design for, and then the students design the project from there. And I think that that's just one way that you can bring the community in, make it more authentic, and empower the students, right? Because if you think about it, if they just randomly came up with some solution to a problem and pitched it to a business. Now they're just kind of like pitching ideas, and maybe the person comes in for the day. Still, the power's with that person that came
Yeah.
in. Now the power is with the kids because the person from me is asking them for help, right? And I think that that's the twist on it that I think is really motivating and powerful for students to see that they're the ones with the agency in this process.
And that, their thought process and their brains were sought out to
Mhm.
solve those problems. I mean, how empowering for a kiddo
Mhm.
to who maybe has never been put in that position of
Yeah.
power, has never had that power complex kind of turned on its head a little bit, where they're in the driver's seat and they get that agency over the problem solving and
Yeah. Yeah.
their education as a whole, and what areas they want to dive into, and where their brain gets really excited. They're the driver's seat in that
Mhm.
moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's one other example I want to share that
Mhm.
I came across this one from. We were doing some work with Digital Promise, and
Mhm.
they highlighted it was a coding program designed for girls, and it was in Southern California, the
Mhm.
school that was doing it. And what was fascinating is they took the STEM challenges, but they also wove it in with social impact projects.
Mhm.
They did it at the same time. So the girls in this, I think it was a middle school project, they were doing robotics and design,
Yeah.
and there was in their particular community, there was a surge in that particular year of homelessness and like tent cities popping up everywhere.
Mhm.
So what they did is they actually designed a solar powered phone charger for tents
Oh,
that they could,
cool.
That is
and they actually built it and modeled it out and prototyped it and connected with some organizations that could then maybe raise money and distribute it to the certain groups there. So
Mhm.
that was another example too of like, yeah, you can learn about solar power, you can learn about robotics and STEM, but they connected it to their community in a way that they can
yes.
help. It wasn't just learning in isolation. So I think that that's another example of how you can take the same curriculum you were doing, solar power robotics, but now you're connecting it
Mhm.
to something that the kids in that community actually care about and can have
Yeah.
an impact on.
And what a
Yeah,
cool way
yeah.
to integrate, uh, like on a larger scope, civics into
Mhm.
those step classes and those
Mhm.
any classroom, any of those spaces, because I think something that we've clearly done a disservice to our past couple of decades of students is we haven't really done a good job integrating civics into all the different spaces that civics exists in the real world.
Mhm.
And so that's a really cool way to like get those girls, they're using those STEMmy parts of their brain, but they're also integrating like how can you use what you have and what gifts you have to serve your community.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
relevancy is so key. If they can see it right in front of them, they know it's a local community issue that they're like, you know, driving by every day or facing or whatever. That just adds to like all the more power behind it and the more like passion and drive to solve these problems and come up with solutions. So that's a great example to share. I think it can be hard for people to see like, yeah, how do I interconnect multiple
Yeah.
subjects? And one of the examples is like, yep, you're already doing all these things. Now it's just do them together and attack all these things at one time. So
Mhm.
love that example. To switch gears a little bit, so Tom, in a kind of our like pre-conversations, we've spoken about the need to value the teaching profession across the board and how we kind of
Mhm.
like as a society shifted away from this value.
Mhm.
Why is it critical to the success of education and school systems to value teachers and the profession overall more?
Yeah, I mean, so it's no secret that the education profession needs to be valued more, or at least from my perspective.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, deeply agreed over here.
So, and that's probably an understatement, right? But I think um, we need to professionalize it, right? And in some
Mhm.
ways, that means thinking differently about which matches well with the title of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About um, not just how do we support teachers, but how do we prepare them and train them?
Mhm.
And I think that starts all the way down with teacher prep programs. Um, in some cases, we got to start there, right?
Mhm.
Because it has been so fascinating to me over the past 10 years, really, that there was this misconception that young teachers just know digital learning, they know
Yeah.
blended learning, they know AI. And when I talk to those 23, 24-year teachers that are new, they didn't get any of this stuff when they were in teacher prep.
Right.
Like, maybe
Yeah.
their teacher prep professor didn't even talk about blended learning. They didn't talk about AI. They didn't talk about any of this stuff. And they're thrown in, and in many cases, they're seen as, like, the person that's gonna help with all of this stuff, but they don't really have any training with it either. So, I think part of it is we really gotta ramp up our teacher prep programs and professionalize it. And then I think when teachers are in the classroom, we have to be better about PD in training.
Yeah.
When I was a teacher, one of the reasons I wanted to go into training is because I was just shocked at how poor it was.
Mm.
I did not get much support at all when I was a new teacher, and nothing against the district I was in. There was just no system for it, and then the PD that we
Yep.
got was very sterile. It was shoot
Yeah.
for the
Mm.
middle, and it was the opposite of what we knew good teaching was. They'd throw us in an auditorium and have us sit there for 3 hours and listen to somebody yap about de-escalation strategies. That is
Yeah.
not training, that is not good.
Mhm.
So, I think, leaning into, like, adult learning theory, what is good teaching, and modeling that for staff, giving
Mhm.
teachers autonomy and choice, I think that makes sense. And then we talked about competency and performance based for kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
we got to have it both ways. You can't professionalize teaching, but then also not expect, you know, to be able to demonstrate that you are good at what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? So I
Right.
think as a teacher, if I were to go in and learn, let me just throw an easy one. Like say, I want to learn how to have students create projects using Adobe Express, creating websites. Okay. So I could sit on a webinar and watch it and then get my hour PD credit,
Yeah.
but that's not, there's no teeth to that,
Mhm.
right? So like, how about I try it? I build a website, I get some feedback on it,
Yeah.
I try it with my kids. That was useful, right?
Mhm.
Where I think that still a good percentage of teacher training is simply just having a teacher hop on a webinar and sitting there for an hour,
Yeah.
or sitting in
Yeah.
an auditorium for an hour. In time-based professional development, and if that's the only thing there is, we all know. And I have friends that are teachers, and it goes both ways. It's like a cultural thing too. Like I actually got a message, and I love this guy to death, but he's like, I just need a free, cheap, easy 1 hour webinar because I need to satisfy my certification.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing, nothing against him, but he's in a system where he has so little value, or he sees so little value in PD, he's just going to do whatever he can to just get the certificate. And that's nothing on him. It's just he's in a system where he has not really gotten any good PD, and he's almost given up on it in a way. And I feel like that's unfortunately more common than not. So I think just to kind
Absolutely.
of come back to, I think we need to ramp up teacher prep programs, and we need to provide real, authentic experiences for teachers to learn on the job.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like that parallel you drew between like what we want to shift the classroom to look like and how that can't just go one direction. It has to be the same for teachers too. And
Mhm.
uh I grew up in a state where I remember my one of my favorite teachers that I ever had, my English teacher sophomore year of high school. She was 23, fresh out of college, and didn't go to college to be a teacher. She was an English major in school. And she was a songwriter and, had to pay her bills. And so an easy thing to get into was to be a high school English teacher. So it's sort of like we were disvaluing this pivotal career choice from the get-go, like from entry into it. And it's like, we know as a society that we value doctors and lawyers and engineers because of how difficult we make it to get into those professions.
Mhm.
And then as teachers continue to get those, one thing that I think might aid teachers in feeling more supportive is that teachers should be paid for that professional development they're continuing to do. That it's one of the few professions where you're not actually compensated for that time that you spend getting those continuing education credits. Whereas, nurses, doctors, as they continue to improve their careers, that's time on the clock. Like they're billing their company or their foundation or organization or whoever they're working for that time, for that improvement of their skill set. And we're not giving teachers that opportunity to do it. So then we're kind of pigeonholing them into the space where they're like, yeah, give me the 1 hour webinar that I can just press play while I do my dishes at home.
Mhm.
Right. Right. And some schools do provide those experiences, but most still don't. Um, but the ones that do provide those experiences, that it's either part of their contract, or because a lot of districts, at least where I am, the unions are pretty strong around here,
Yeah.
in a good way. And I think that they do a pretty good job of building in professional development days as part of their compensation package, and that makes sense, right? Other districts will actually build it in where there will be an hourly rate. So one of my friends is a science teacher. If he does curriculum work over the summer, there's an hourly rate for it, right? So some schools are compensating for it, but you're right. There are some that are just like you're on your own, and that's not
Yeah.
supportive as a
Yeah,
profession.
that's
Yeah.
not
Right.
supportive at all. I mean, that's just what more blatant way to say like we don't really care about you improving and upskilling yourself as an educator to
Yeah.
not compensate for that
Right.
time.
It's a
Mhm.
checklist.
Yeah.
Check it off and show that you did it, for your licensures or whatever. And I think we now are in this really tough part too, where we're across the board seeing schools like have budget cuts. And the first thing I think to go is like solid PD. It's one, and that makes sense, in some ways. There's other things that, kid wise might take more priority, but it's just like up the bummer when we know it's going to be such a cyclical like experience and like really pay off in the end. If we're giving that strong, powerful PD, it'll only help our teachers, which will only helps our kids at the end of the day. And I think that's like one of the first things to be cut. And that's like we see this lack of value higher up than yourself, it's hard to like put that in your own shoes. You're like, oh, then why should I value it also at the same time? It's just like a
Yeah.
endless cycle.
I'm curious about your opinion. Again, I'm the only person in this conversation who hasn't been a teacher in the classroom before. But
Mhm.
when I think of teachers upskilling themselves and the trajectory of their career, it seems like the course that's kind of at play is that you're a teacher, and then you become some type of administrator, and you kind of move up in that chain, but that chain takes you out of the classroom and takes you away from those, like,
Mhm.
spending that entire semester, that entire school year with a group of students, or with individual students that you could really impact. And I mean, I'm just curious what you all's opinion is on how that is also kind of devaluing the career choice of becoming a teacher. Because if we're only paying you more whenever you kind of take yourself away from the classroom and get into those administration positions, and what are we really telling teachers?
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, when I think back of when I was in college, there was a professor that one of his main focus areas was how do we provide different roles in school that doesn't take the best teachers out of the class.
Hmm.
So some districts have been experimenting with, um, actually, I think it's kind of based on the Scandinavian model of having those mentor teachers that are still senior teachers in the class, but they have more of a coaching role. So they're coaches, but they're not out of the class. They still teach. Um, People observe them teach, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
like coaching, but still teaching. Um, I think that the problem is some of our school districts are just so complex as far as staffing and scheduling that
Mhm.
even the thought of that makes some people's head want to detonate, right? Because it's just so complicated to do that. But I think if you can find a way, that would be the best because you don't take that great teacher out of the classroom, but you still give them a role. Maybe you compensate them more for being that mentor teacher.
Hmm.
If you think of it, it'd be more of like a tiered status. So
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to get necessarily into the whole argument over like unions and contracts, but I think one of the problems with those contracts is you're a teacher or you're not, and there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And they need
Mhm.
to fix that. Like say there were like, entry level teachers have a certain title for, and then maybe mid-career teachers have certain roles, and then if you're an experienced teacher, you get this other role. But then it can value the teachers that are good, without
Yeah.
forcing them out of the classroom, which is
Yeah.
what happens a lot of times with administration. And here's the other thing that's kind of weird. We're losing people to good administration because some of the structures are so dumb on that front too. I know so many teachers that are top step, teachers.
Hmm.
If they went to administration, they would take a pay cut.
Mm.
So if we're trying to get some of the best people into administration too, like why
Yeah.
would we cut
Yes.
their pay? So I
Right.
think it goes both ways where like you can't, because so some of the pushback is like, oh, we'll just cut administrator pay to keep them in the classroom. Well, that's that's
Yeah, that
not good
doesn't work
either.
either.
If we want really good leaders in schools, we have to have good compensation for that.
Yes.
Um, and then for everybody is like, "Oh, we need to cut administration." Like, no. If you look at what, a superintendent for a school district, right? So say you're a superintendent and you're running a school district that has like, 1,000 teachers and 10,000 kids, whatever it is, and you're running the show. Let's take a step back. If you're a CEO of a company that had 2,000 employees, right? And you compare that to what a superintendent's making,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying that it's apples to apples, but like, if you run an organization somewhere else that's not a school at that scale, you're making a heck of a lot more. So I
Yeah.
think that even at the top level, if we want really good leadership in schools, we need to compensate them too, right? So it's not just, and I feel like the what happens is people get pitted against each other when there's a lack of resources, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to happen this fall. It's already happening. The federal government completely gutted the Department of Ed, which we saw happen. It is going to have negative impacts on public schools. Anyone who says it's not is not telling the truth. It is going to. And it's going to cut into professional development budgets. It's going to cut into a lot of
Yes.
stuff. But I think what happens here is we have to be careful not to now just say, um, everybody gets in their fiefdoms, right? And
Mhm.
we need more teachers, we need more resources, we need more PD, we need more whatever it is, and then it ends up into a, okay, well, cut the other guy,
Yeah.
and that's not healthy either. So I think, um, when we have these conversations about like funding of school and resources and pathways for teachers and supporting administrators, we need to look at it holistically because these are the times where it gets kind of ugly. And I've been
Yeah.
in when I entered the profession, um, of course, I entered in 2007. You guys remember what happened the next year?
Yeah.
Economic collapse, right? So it was an absolute mess in 2008 when I was just starting, and so my entry into the profession was just wading right into those disastrous budget fights.
Yeah.
So I get it, but I think that we all just kind of have to be mindful that just cutting the other side of the aisle is not really going to move education forward. We got to lift the whole boat up.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of, with everything going on in the world and uh a lot of emotions are tied to things, and there's a lot of discussion in public forums
Mhm.
around human rights, and I think of that sort of almost elementary comparison of like human rights aren't like pie. Someone getting more doesn't mean you get less. But
Mhm.
at the
Right.
same time, we in the United States specifically, like something that makes us so special as a nation is that we guarantee a right to education here. And yet we're treating something that we've designated as a human right. We're putting it in the pile of things that we are treating like pie. And more for one sector of this right does mean less for another sector of this education playground and space. And it just seems like that in and of itself is fundamentally wrong. If we're working in a system where, more support for administrators means less support for teachers, then we're not doing something
Right.
correctly because
Mhm.
we from the beginning decided that a right to education is something we're going to consider a human right here.
Mhm.
So true.
Yeah, and a lot of that's shifting to the states now, obviously, because
Mhm.
that's just kind of the way it's working. So, things could keep going right, right? I mean, they could, but we need all 50 states to kind of be paddling in their same direction now, and we're putting a lot of
Yes.
faith that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
um, I mean, if let's take a step back. What's one of the reasons we have a federal Department of Education? It's because some of the states were not following civil rights law,
Right.
Yes.
right? So let's do a little history lesson there. I mean, that's why we have it. So when we get rid of it, if that stuff starts to become an issue again, it shouldn't be a shock to anybody,
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
But
And
but
I know that all too well. The law school that I attended at University of Oklahoma was the first law school to accept Black women into that profession or into
Mhm.
that, that educational space. And so to your point, that's the reason we have a federal Department of Education, because even though we had passed all these federal laws that, should have long before opened the doors to these educational spaces to people of different genders and colors, they weren't. So
Mhm.
we needed some level of standardization, which kind of circles back to what we started talking about at the very
Mhm.
beginning.
Yes.
Like, we
Mhm.
do need a little standardization, but
Mhm.
too much
Ugh.
makes education too sterile.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think to your point, yes, I think we'll see negative impacts come this fall on education this next school year. But I think it's all starting now this pivotal moment. They can go one of two ways, and we need educators across the board to be like on this what do you call it? I don't know the right word, like defense toward it to push it in the right
Yeah.
direction so we can move forward and not have it swing so far backwards after all these other changes.
Yeah, fingers crossed that we see a lot of creative and wonderful
Yeah.
solution in some states that other states can then go and replicate,
Yes.
and it can just benefit the students at the end of the day. This is
Mhm.
a nice transition into talking about how industry maybe can alleviate
Mhm.
some of those pressures on
Mhm.
teachers and educators and administrators. We believe in bringing industry into the classroom. We know that at EdTech Teachers, you guys believe it too. So,
Yeah.
can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that that's so vital to all of this, and not just because of funding issues, but um, it just makes sense, right? If we're preparing students for these professions, then why would we not include those professions, right? Um, and there was a book that came out, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's called "In Search of Deeper Learning" by Jal Mehta, and he did some research on a lot of schools here in Massachusetts, and a lot of it showed that the high school students, particularly that did the best, were the ones that had those industry connections, um,
Hmm.
and that real world relevance. So one thing that we've been lucky enough to do at EdTech Teacher, and from what I heard your organization was able to do as well, is make connections with some of those partners, right? So we
Mhm.
partner with um, some of the bigger players like Google, Adobe, Mozilla, Formative, and most recently IBM,
Yeah.
and we are having them help shape. What are some of these resources, especially in the emerging tech space? Why would we not consult with them?
Mhm.
I mean, the leading companies in the world are right here in the United States for tech, so why in the world would we not tap into them? It just seems incredibly
Yeah.
dumb not to. And they provide so much of this stuff for free.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, just one example, and so you have been doing some work on with the quantum work with IBM.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're dipping our toes in that space.
So that stuff is wild, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of schools want IBM Skills Build, for instance, like that's just a platform where you can get industry credentials, and
Yeah.
that's one of our next ventures. The AI space is picking up, but really we need to be thinking about how do we position these kids so that when they get out of school, they can lead this next generation of generative AI.
Mhm.
Because whatever we teach them now is going to be irrelevant in 6 to 12 months for the most part. So it's
For
more just
sure.
like how do we get them on that trajectory,
Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
and learning the industry standards. And I think also for ourselves as educators, when we need to learn some of these new technologies, um, we don't need some teacher version of this. Let's just go right to the source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we need to learn about what generative AI is. Why don't we go to the people that invented this stuff?
Mhm.
Right? Uh, so I think that that's really helpful. And this program's out there. So,
Yes.
for instance, your group runs some. Anybody who wants to work with us, same thing.
Yeah.
We have the resources, we have the industry connections. It's just trying to make make the connections between the communities
Yes.
and find that common ground. And I think once we can find it, it can really take off. And a lot of the barriers to real world learning in schools is logistical,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
if we can break through some of those, it would go a long way. So there was a superintendent I worked with, Mario Andrade. He's still good friends of mine. He introduced me to these ideas around, when you have challenges, like you have certain challenges that are kind of like structural challenges, but some are just like
Mhm.
tactical,
Yes.
right? So the tactical ones we can address.
Yep.
Mhm.
So I'll give you one example. There was an internship we were lining up in one of the districts I was working in, and it was going to be perfect. It was working with the marine industry. A lot of at-risk students were going to be all about it, and it was a certain time each day that the kids could go in. Well, we had a rotating schedule at the high school.
Mm.
Mm.
So guess what the answer was?
No.
We can't do it because we have a rotating schedule, and that's
Right.
what drives me nuts,
Yeah.
right? Like, we had a beautiful industry partnership that was gonna get these kids, on a path to
Yes.
possible employment the next year, and we couldn't do it because we had a rotating schedule.
Yeah.
So,
That's
those are the things
disaster.
where, like, I know it's a pain in the ass, but let's just figure it out. Right? Because there are so many instances I see where there are these great ideas, industry wants to come in and work, but as
Mhm.
soon as industry tries to reach their hand out and work with them, the school district's like, "Oh, you don't fit within our special little unicorn of a system."
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
let's just stop for a second and think about what is the bigger picture here and how can we as adults make this happen for this kid? And,
Mhm.
I think that needs to happen more, than it is currently.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, because the real world, I mean, there's so many things going on when we bring in these industry professionals.
Mhm.
One, we're not asking teachers to the point you were making earlier about, whatever we teach about AI right now is going to be completely irrelevant or totally different in 6 months or maybe even sooner than that. Tech moves super duper fast. So rather than trying to take these teachers and make them experts in this industry so that they can connect their classroom to the careers that are going to be waiting for these kids whenever they graduate from school,
Yeah.
why don't we just bring the people that are in that revolving door in that industry space
Mhm.
into the classroom, and they get to be the experts, and the teachers don't have to put another hat on. They're already wearing 74 hats as it is. Like, let's acknowledge that and let
Yeah.
them focus on the classroom management and supporting their students and supporting their students learning styles and translating what's going on from this industry professional coming out of this industry professional's mouth to something that these kids can digest and understand and wrap their heads around and be interested in.
Yes.
Because that's what
Mhm.
the teachers are good at. That's what the teachers do. They don't need to be the tech experts in the classroom. We can bring tech experts into the
Right.
classroom.
Yeah.
Right.
And the real world workforce is, one of the small benefits that we got out of COVID is that it's increasingly more flexible. People have really flexible schedules. A lot of these big tech giants work in really flexible ways and spaces. So just because the school has a specific schedule, maybe just present that to these industry partners and see if they've got a workaround, because they're probably doing some hybrid work schedule anyways, and could maybe send some of those industry professionals just to the school, to these times, on these dates, and make it work for them.
Yeah. I think that goes back to your earlier point from our beginning of our conversation around like just bringing creativity back into schools more, and everything that like is doable. These are all small shifts that if we just start an inch at a time can make huge impacts, and it gets easier and easier and easier if we can have a little room in our schedule. Then we can have this huge impact of industry coming in. Now we have the
Mhm.
curriculum learning, and I feel like teachers get so fearful. Sometimes like, oh, I can't talk about AI. I don't know much about it, or I can't talk about coding. I don't know much about it, or whatever it is. And it's like you don't have to be the expert here, like you said.
Yeah.
We can bring people in if we just shift a little bit at a time, and then it doesn't feel like this huge monster all at
Yeah.
once, but it can be just bit by bit.
Mhm.
But but
Yeah, I guess
yep.
just two quick resources to follow up for anyone that wants to jump into this is
Mhm.
if you're interested in doing more of like authentic real world learning in your classroom with your school, we partnered a couple years ago with Digital Promise to create, it's called the Real World Learning Toolkit. So if you just look up Digital Promise Real World Learning Toolkit, it's designed for teachers and school administrators that just want to try this stuff. And it has different. There's even some platforms in there where if you go in, you say, "I want this type of industry professional," it'll connect you with someone in that field. There's a few different
Cool.
companies out there that do that. But yeah, so there's resources out there to check out if you're interested in some of the AI literacy and IBM work. That we're actually getting the website set up this week. So um, yeah, so if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to admin at edtechteacher.org or just me. I'm Driscoll at edtechteacher.org. We'll get you set up in it. But essentially, anyone who wants to work with us, we have an AI literacy foundations industry credential that you can get. It's about 10 hours. And it's by IBM. I mean, they create it and they issue the Credly certificate. So all you have to do is log in, do it. And then we are actually looking for some feedback on it on how we could provide wraparound services that are for teachers that go with it. So if you're interested in letting
Yep.
us know, but either way, reach out and and it's not just us. A lot of organizations around here do it. Your organization does it. If you look up this, if you want to focus your professional learning around AI industry connections, there's a lot out there. You might have to look a little bit, but and the good thing is a lot of it is funded by philanthropic
Mhm.
organizations. We talked about how government spending might be down, but other spending might not be. So, for instance, a lot of organizations focus on enhancing teaching practice. I
Mm.
know here in I live in Rhode Island, they have something called the Rhode Island Foundation, philanthropic organization that gives grants to teachers in schools that are just trying cool things in the classroom. So,
Yeah.
my advice would be, if you're running into some roadblocks funding wise, look for some of these programs that are either run by industry or philanthropic groups. Oh, and here's the other thing: some companies have arms of their company that are for philanthropy,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? So, like the group we're working with at IBM, it's their corporate social responsibility department or something, right? So, Verizon was the one that funded the innovative schools program through Digital Promise. So there still may be funding out there for these types of innovative programs. You just got to search a little bit, but once you get it, they're great people that want to help you. So it's
Yeah.
really just making that connection and finding the support that you need.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's
And
great advice.
it's great advice. And I just want to echo to any teachers and educators listening to the podcast out there or watching
Mhm.
it or anything, those kinds of organizations like MindSpark is exactly what Tom's talking about. That's the kind of work that we do all the time. We have schools
Mhm.
come to us and they're like, we don't have the funding for it, but this is the kind of PD we want to give to our teachers. Can you help us find it? We love to do that kind of work. That's what we do. It's what we exist for. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Great advice. Well, it's time to kind of get ready to wrap up here. We've talked about a couple of challenges already and given some advice that you've offered great insight to so many different topics. But what is one challenge or opportunity education you would suggest listeners tackle head on right now? And why is there nothing like the present to get started?
Mine is to find your tribe.
Mhm.
Find your tribe. Things are changing fast now, and yet you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
We're gonna the next 5 years are gonna be a wild ride. So
Mhm.
find that partner, right? So whether it's in your school, across the town, or across the world, find somebody that you trust, that
Mhm.
you can kick ideas around with. Find a community, and find the close group of teacher friends that you can ask stuff to, but then find a network.
Yeah.
Right? So people about professional learning communities, I think of that as like in your school, professional learning networks, like explain your PLN, find some
Mm.
conferences, find some groups that you can connect with. That's going to be so valuable for you in the next few years. I've lived it. When I first started out in schooling, I thought it was the most isolating profession on the planet. I was teaching in a
Mhm.
very rural school district. There were only 3 teachers in my department. I had no one really asked questions to, and I came across this new thing called Twitter, right?
Yeah.
And I had my Twitter chats with all my SS chat friends, and it seems stupid now, but like back then, like that was my tribe. I was reaching out. I found teachers to ask questions to. God knows what it is right now for new teachers. There's like 18 different social networks to try, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, find it and then lean into it, because that's going to help you make the most out of the next few years in education, because it's going to change fast, but we're all in this.
Yep.
Everyone's new to a lot of this coming out. Nobody's an expert in generative AI because it
Yeah.
came out 2 years
True.
ago,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So reach out, find that community, and that's what's going to help you out more than anything, is the community of teachers.
I love that.
Yeah.
Building that community and
Yes.
building that tribe of teachers, but also like building a larger network, like maybe there for some teachers out there that they're not working in a district that's super supportive of those experiential learning things. Maybe you can find those industry partners and those folks that you can have zoom into your classroom or come by one day, and you can kind of start to integrate these things and get that support from that teacher network, but build a larger network too, because teaching needs to be so much more interconnected into the rest of the world, because
Mhm.
teachers are the ones that are shaping the folks that are going to lead all these other sectors for the rest of the world.
Hmm. Yep, well said.
Perfect. Well, that is a wrap for our episode of Think Different. So before we go, we always leave you with one last spark. Tom, what's one idea or insight you want listeners to carry forward from our conversation together today?
I would say one driving thought would be, regardless of all the different tools and strategies and ideas that are thrown at you, at the end of the day, students are always looking for an experience that's meaningful,
Hmm.
that's engaging, and that has some type of impact.
Yeah,
Yes.
So if you focus on that, you're always going to be in a good spot.
absolutely.
That's
I
a good
like
point.
couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I like that.
Thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you joining MindSpark to discuss the importance of meaningful and empowering experiences in education for students, and for sharing all of your insight through your experience in working with the K through 12 world. I know you dropped your email earlier and a few other ways to get a hold of folks at EdTech and you yourself, but where can listeners find you one more time so they know where to reach out with those questions or comments or feedback or concerns or anything?
Yeah, easiest way is just my last name, Driscoll, at edtechteacher.org. Just send me a direct message. And then on a variety of social media platforms at Tom Driscoll EDU.
Awesome.
Okay.
We'll make sure to tag that for listeners below, and encourage any of our teachers listening out there to give you some feedback on some of those IBM projects that you're working on so you guys can build, the best supportive mechanisms for teachers out there.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah, this was a good conversation.
Talk soon, Tom.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right, great. Well, at MindSpark, we don't just think differently, we think difference. If this conversation sparks something in you, share it forward. Let's keep making the weirdest connections to get the biggest change together. Until next time,
Stay curious, stay bold, and keep thinking different.